All right. Welcome, everyone. Today we have a very fun, very informative webinar to present to you. I know I have been super excited for this webinar for a long time. Can't wait to share this conversation with you. So first off, a little bit of housekeeping. So this webinar will be recorded and it will be available on UCASA's YouTube page, hopefully later today, but it might be by tomorrow, which is Wednesday, correct? Yeah. And so you can watch that as many times as you'd like, and you can share it with folks who maybe weren't able to be here live today, had some other stuff going on. So I'm going to turn it over to Haley, and Haley's going to kind of get us started on our little journey here.
Yeah, this is a fun topic, so I'm excited to get into it. So I want to know what you guys think. Why do you think teenagers are online? What are they doing on there? I mean, obviously they're creating content, but what is the point of them, interacting with each other online? You guys could just chat us. We can look through the chat.
Right.
See if we can connect with people.
Oh, you see it? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. For them to connect with people. Anybody else learn? Yep. Sense of belonging and connection, validation, socialization, seek validation from peers, not isolate. Yeah, this is great. Distraction. Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. There's a lot going on right now. Also learn. Yeah, definitely. All right, cool. Should we go ahead and click entertainment? Yeah. So teens are online to learn, create, and interact with others. Y'all pretty much covered it. That's great. When I was doing research for this, so I actually presented this at UCASA's conference a couple months ago. But I found some research on this that the Morning Consult found that 54% of Gen Zers said they spend at least 4 hours daily on social media, and 38% of those kids spend even more time than that. So they're online quite a bit. They are, influenced by a lot of content, good and bad, and, the gray area, everything in between. So you want to go ahead and click. Thank you. So what I'm going to do now is I want you guys to tell me, I have some Gen Z slang up here, and I want you to tell me what each of these mean, and then we'll see how you did. Okay. So what does slay mean? You rock. I like that. Yes, queen. Yeah, cool. Killing it. Yeah, that's great. To do something well. I put this in very simple terms. So what about 8? You did great. Yep. To look good. Yeah, to do great. That's awesome. What about go off? This is one of my favorite things to say, personally. Keep talking, share your thoughts. Yeah, that's great. To talk about doing something. What about Riz? So I work with teenagers. I talk to teenagers every day, and we have them write down what makes relationships healthy. And there was one school, I think it was Weber High School, that just kept writing Riz. That was the first time I ever heard of that. And I was like, are you guys being inappropriate? Because I have no idea what you're saying right now. But it actually you guys covered it in the chat, having game, charisma. Yeah, I didn't even know it was short for charisma until recently. So yeah, flirting well. That's great.
Interesting. Charisma. It's funny because in my Discord, someone said this to me like right after I went to your presentation. And the way that I had kind of heard this before is to like to rile someone up, like kind of rinse someone up
Oh,
and to kind of make them mad. And so when they said that, I was like, oh no, we had like a good time. And then they're like, no, honey, that means to flirt. I'm like, oh, so I'm old is what you're saying. Okay, cool. Okay.
I'm
Okay.
old.
Okay.
What about gagged? This one in the presentation we had a harder time with, but like when they make a vomiting sound, right? Shocked in a good way. Left speechless. Yeah. So shocked in a good way, I would say. I like the making a vomiting sound. That was good. Have not heard my teen say that. Yeah, this language is it's chronically online, and it comes from let's hold on. What does stan mean? Sorry. And then I'll continue. Support. Yep, that's exactly what it is. To stand something, to be a huge fan of something or someone. And then we've got read or read, depending on who's saying it. Understood. Almost. Yeah, 10 to 4, LOL. To call someone out, usually. Now, this language is, now, Andy, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is considered ballroom vernacular.
Yeah, so a lot of these terms and a lot of terms that we see in mainstream culture originate from like drag and queer culture, which originate from Black and Latinx culture, and especially Black ballroom culture. Yeah, so I will pop a yep, so Paris is burning. So I will pop a link into the chat. There's a really cool article about this, and I think a lot of people, like when they first hear words, they're like, oh, that's interesting, like, oh, these kids are creating new words, when in reality they're getting them from somewhere else, right? These are words that have historically been used by brown and Black queer folks for decades upon decades. So it's really kind of interesting to see that. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's great. Perfect. So here's what you need to know about Gen Z. Okay. So they are the first generation to never know the world without the internet. They will, never have those type of resources. They really value diversity and finding their unique identities. And they've also proven to be more socially conscious and politically active than previous generations, which is great. But they will also cancel you before you can blink or even understand why you're being canceled. So I want to know, what do you guys think about cancel culture? Do you think it is, a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Is it productive? Does it start conversations? What do you guys think about cancel culture? It can be both. Yeah, I would agree with that.
Jorge, would you elaborate? Yeah, I think me and Haley were talking about this when we were creating this, or when I was supporting her with this presentation, is cancel culture is really quite interesting, right? And so think about how folks, especially folks who have perpetrated sexual violence, have not been held accountable for decades upon decades upon decades, especially those with power, those who are famous, so on and so forth, right? And so it's really interesting to see that when folks, victims, survivors are getting more support, there's more conversation about victimization, sexual violence in the zeitgeist, that we're seeing people holding folks who have perpetrated accountable, right? And think about how we went from zero accountability to now the pendulum is swinging, right, in the way of accountability, like socially,
Yep.
in some ways, right? We do know that rape, and sexual violence are, some of the lowest prosecuted crimes, right? So we know that we're not seeing this huge increase in rape, being prosecuted more. But we are seeing people stand up and say, hey, this isn't okay. You've been doing this for decades. You do not get to work in the field anymore. You do not get to, you do not continue, right? And remember that, again, as the pendulum swings, we have gone from one extreme to the other. And so we as a community, a culture, as a nation, as a world, have to figure out how to even that out. And this, calls for these really in-depth discussions on healing, on justice, on accountability, right? And so it's really interesting to see this shift. And I mean, Haley's going to also talk a little bit about the, ability for folks to understand media, that media literacy. And yeah, it's really quite interesting to kind of see how this is kind of swinging. Someone said calling someone in can be much more productive, right? Than calling someone out. In order to have vital conversations, there needs to be a space that supports trust. Yeah, it's interesting, right? This reparative, like, shame, right? Where we utilize shame to alter bad and hurtful behavior, but in a way to continue to bring people in. And imagine how difficult that can be for folks who have been victimized, right? Is that not only folks who have been victimized have to carry the burden of that victimization and re-traumatization, but also have to carry that burden of supporting the person who perpetrated violence against them, right? And so that has been difficult, right? And I think that's some of the things that I've kind of noticed throughout that. But
that was a really great way of saying that. Thank you.
You're very kind.
Okay, so here are what Gen Z's top social issues are. They care a lot about climate change. 41% of them cited global warming as, the most important issue facing our world. Obviously, after COVID, I think within recent years, we paid more attention to mental health and the importance of, that topic and getting people resources and help. But COVID, I think, really changed a lot because students in particular, college students as well, but for teenagers in particular, they were forced to, start learning and doing things all behind a screen. So they had to adapt to online learning and had to limit in-person interactions just like the rest of us did, but at such a young age that, that's a hard thing to go through. Racial and gender equality, they have a strong desire for change, for inclusion and equal opportunities for all people. Gun control, obviously, this is a pretty scary thing that's happening right now. And these are the kids that are in schools and are scared to go to school. So we've got a lot of movements that are led by teenagers, which I think is brave and amazing. But then economic concerns as well. So Gen Z is worried that they're not going to be able to financially support themselves in a struggling economy. I don't know if any of you have seen like those TikToks or memes that teens have put up when they're like, I don't know what I was doing when I was 9 years old. I should have been worrying about buying a house, because there's no way that they're going to be able to buy a house now. So so those are their top social issues that they care about. And they do have a voice, a very loud voice too. And I think, we'll talk about how, from like an adult perspective, how we view this and, how teenagers have gone about some of these social issues. But I think it's important that we listen to them because they are our future and they do matter. So I think that their voices are very valuable in all of these topics.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And think about the work that we have all done to make it so that the people who come after us don't have to go through the things that we went through. I don't want the queer kids, I don't want the trans kids to have to go through what I had to go through, right? And think about like Haley, like all this awesome prevention work like that you do, you're literally trying to prevent those things from happening, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And Gen Z's like, oh, we're gonna change things.
You're right. Okay, so let's talk about the positive use of technology. And we kind of covered this in the beginning when we talked about why teens were online, but they really value connecting and communicating with their peers. This could be over text, this could be over gaming, which Andy will talk about here soon. It could, be over social media. They're commenting and liking each other's posts, whether, it could be Instagram, it could be TikTok especially, but also Snapchat. A lot of kids are on Snapchat. They can find support and validation. I actually teach like a teen version of this presentation to teenagers. And, I think a lot of the times based on my conversations with these kids, but also like my experience as a teenager, which, that was like 5-6 years ago. Sometimes it can feel like you are so isolated and, what's happening to you and what you're going through is you feel so alone, right? So then when you can go online and find a community that, has gone through similar things, or they can validate you and all these sorts of things, that could be a very powerful thing for a teenager. And they don't even have to be near, right? You can build online friendships, and we'll talk about online safety, of course, but you can build online friendships and meet other people from different schools that maybe you might not have been able to do several years ago. But yeah, building relationships. And then of course, locating resources like YCC, like UCASA, and like all of the organizations y'all work for. They can find those things and, even influence their friends to go find those things, which is great.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I know like when we have these conversations about technology use and abuse, folks get nervous, right? They're like, well, this is all bad. All I hear is all these terrible things. And, we want to make sure that we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, right? Is that, remember, and I think Haley's going to talk about this a little bit more in depth throughout the presentation, is that these same tactics of abuse that we've seen, the same ways that people have utilized sexual violence against others and power and control, are the same tactics that people are using. They just look a little bit different, right? Because now technology is in the mix. And so keep that in mind, is that we can change and alter things and have these really great conversations and educational experiences, and technology is part of our world. It's not going anywhere, and we have to figure out how to essentially get used to it, right? So this is really interesting. When looking for more information about video games and socialization, I found some really interesting studies, right? And I'm sure this comes as no surprise, but 72% of teens play video games, right? And 81% have access to a game console. So a game console would be like a PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5, an Xbox, stuff like that, right? A Switch. And so I'm sure it comes as no surprise that more boys have access than girls, but the number of girls that do have access and play online is a lot higher than folks realize, right? But gaming now is a major pathway to create and maintain friendships. During COVID, that is what I did, right? Is that I met people on games, became friends with them, started a Discord, and now I have, several close friends that I've known for years, and I'm glad that I met them, right? And I get to play games with them. So it's really interesting because it is true that most teens play with folks that they do know IRL, which is in real life. So about 89% play with people they know in real life. And some, play with online only friends, about half, and then half of them play with people that are strangers, right? And so, you know, especially when we have conversations about tech with our kids and young folks, is that it's really important to help folks and support folks in how to more safely use technology, because people are going to use technology. Again, it's not going away. So how do we utilize technology that we have to use every day, or that we do use every day, in a way that is more safe, right? In a way that limits our potential for being victimized, right? And so now we're going to play the word game, but we're going to play it with gaming terminology. Okay. So just like before, we're going to have words, and then I want you to guess what they mean in chat. So this first word is meta. What does meta mean? And remember, this is in the context of gaming. What is meta? Yep, this is a hard one. This is a hard one. So it means most popular perks, items, skills, right? So in the game I play, folks will say, they're running meta perks. And it's like, I immediately know that they're running pain res, that they're running surge, that they're running, you know, I immediately know exactly what they're running, right? Okay, main. What does main mean? Yeah, I love this.
I do too.
I love this. Yeah, it's hard. It's hard, huh? So, okay. So main can mean main area or who you play the most. So, so I main Jill and Ada. So what that means is that I play Jill. So Jill is P100. She's Prestige 100. So I play her the most. She's my main character that I play. And then Ada is another character that I play, you know, equally, right? So I don't generally play any other character. I usually only play one of those two because that's who I main. And then the main area can be on when you're on a map, like when I say, oh, I'm in Maine, then that means that I'm in the main area. Either I'm, you know, doing an objective or something that, you know, my teammates on comms know where I'm at, so they can stay away from there, or they can come to me to help me. What does nerf mean? Rip, I know, make it bad. Yeah, to make weaker. Yeah. So yeah. Yeah, so when, you know, there's an update and they're like, oh, they're gonna nerf made for this, like, oh, rip, right? What does buff mean? Yes, yes, yep, to improve, to make stronger, right? It's like, oh, nice. They're gonna buff DH or something, right? They would never buff DH, but what's OP mean? Ooh, original player. I love that. I love that. OP is like really good, like overpowered, right? So like I'm gonna say something to Haley here in a second in like gamer speak for this game, and then she's gonna translate what I say to you.
I'm
And
gonna
I will
try.
use OP. Yeah, she's gonna try. So grind. What does grind mean? Okay, work hard, right? So play a lot to unlock, obtain level ups, right? So like during events, I will grind in the game so that I can prestige my characters, right? Because I want them to both be P100. So yeah, you see this a lot for like role-playing games. It's like, oh, I'm gonna go grind. It's usually that you're going to go, you know, fight a lot of random encounters to get more experience points to level up your character. What does spawn mean? Okay, join a game. Close, close, close. It's where your character starts on the map. And for some like FPS, like first person shooters, like you can respawn. So like when I spawn in the game that I play, I say, oh, I spawned by Shack. Right. And so then my teammates know, okay, you're by Shack, I'm by main. I'm over here, whatever, so that we can know kind of where we're at. Okay, so let me say this to Haley and see if she can understand. Okay. Okay, bro. I was legit looping this Wesky in main, and he kept on vaulting windows, and he refused to break pallets, and low-key tunneled me out and literally camped. Like, yeah.
That's rude.
Yeah. So what did I just say?
Okay. Okay, so I mean, vaulting is jumping through or over a pallet or through the window.
Yeah.
A pallet in Dead by Daylight is like it's a wooden pallet that you can throw down so that the killer has to like stall or break it, or they have to go around it. So it kind of is a block in the game for them. I'm just saying what I can remember what you said. So.
I know. Yeah, like tunneling and camping.
Tunneling and camping. Okay, so when a killer camps you, they put you, well, are we talking about like you're on the hood?
So they just kind of like, stand in front of you, right? And so you can't do anything.
Yep.
Yeah. And then tunneling is just when someone continues to go after the same person so that they are unable to play the game, right?
It's really rude.
So do you see that? Like I said that, and like I love that you're like, yeah, you're so cute. You're like explaining everything. So do you see how kids have different terminology? Gen Z has different terminology. Gamers have different terminology. Sometimes that comes together, but sometimes it can be hard to understand what someone is saying, right?
Mm-hmm. Definitely. So we know teenagers are super tech savvy. Okay. They're very comfortable with the internet. I'll give you an example. Part of my job is I run and create content for and post on the YCC Prevention Instagram and TikTok. And I told Andy this, and I tell our kids this all the time, but the amount of time it takes me to edit a TikTok is absolutely ridiculous. Okay. So these things kind of come easy to them. I don't understand how, but they do. So they're really comfortable here. They're really comfortable on the internet in this space, but that doesn't mean that they are not susceptible to experiencing some form of digital abuse, whether it is dating or, some form of grooming, which we'll talk about later. And they're not, like I said, they're not always equipped to handle these things. So it's kind of up to us as, adults in their life, whether we're parents or teachers or, we're working with teenagers, we need to, talk to them about these things and equip them with the tools to get, to be safe online, because the internet is not the problem. Okay. The way we use the internet and the way we use social media, that is what's the problem. So we kind of need to work together to come up with solutions so that, teenagers can navigate through these things and these new relationships, because, quite frankly, they are just starting to date and navigate these new romantic relationships. They don't really know what they're doing. It's awkward. It's great. It's supposed to be fun, right? But the internet can make that very hard. So do you want to talk about online scams?
I would love to talk about online scams. So this is really interesting. I'm wondering if y'all knew this, but Gen Z folks are 3 times more likely to fall for online scams than their grandparents. 3 times more likely.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Right? And I mean, think about the reasons why. So we know that scammers know what they're doing. We literally know. They are smart. It's billions and billions of dollar industry a year, right? Think about how as technology continues to advance, there's going to be more advancements in scams and the ways that we can access other people's personal and private information, right? And remember that Gen Z folks are chronically online, right? So there are more opportunities to be scammed, right? Think about if you drive more, there's a higher chance that you will get in a car accident, right? Simply because you're engaging in driving, so you're more like, right? And there's all these different scams like crypto. Cryptocurrency, that is a huge area of scamming, right? Is that people will be like, oh, hey, I started a new cryptocurrency, or hey, I'm selling NFTs, or working with crypto, and you send me money and then I'll send you this much crypto, right? And it's rough, because a lot of people don't really understand cryptocurrency. They don't understand NFTs, and those kind of scam things, right? And also, when you're on social media, how many times do you see an ad for a company or a store or something that you've never heard of, and they're selling like these like t-shirts, or they're selling some little like doodad or like a keychain or like a fidget spinner, or something like that, right? And you're like, oh cool, only $2, right? And you're like, honey, like some of the ads that I see on like Facebook and Instagram and stuff, and I'm like, how did these pass quality control, right?
Right.
I mean, fake products, fake job offers are all over the place. I mean, remember back in the day when we, ordered something online, we would check like the verified by Visa, logo, and like check the link and, verify. And now it's just like you click on something that you want, you spend, $5 on it, and you put in all your information, and then you just go on with your life, right? But the thing is too, with everything being online, is that a lot of people send links to each other. A lot of people send information via text, and so people are just naturally inclined to just click links because that's just how people communicate now, right? When fake links, phishing, farming, all these different things have been around forever, and now because of the normalization of technology use, it just makes it easier to do that. So are we saying that Gen Z folks are silly and not as smart and we need to be rude to them? Absolutely not. Okay, so scammers, literally, it's an art, right? So for older folks, folks who are grandparents, it's saying, hey, your grandkid is in jail, you need to send me $40,000 now, or they're going to get sent to prison, right? Or it's the IRS calling you, and you're like, oh snap, I don't want to get in trouble with the IRS, right? Well, if you call a Gen Z person and you say, hey, your grandkid is in prison, they're going to be like, excuse me, are you like, bro, are you okay? Right? And like the IRS, they might be too young to have really dealt with the IRS, right? Or know even of the implications of, being investigated by the IRS. So remember that these are all curated for the victim, okay? And it can be really difficult. A lot of people fall for scams that you wouldn't think would, or people even in the industry, right? Okay.
All right, cool. So let's talk about some of the negative uses of technology. So social media does in fact increase depression and anxiety. Why do y'all think that is? Comparison, isolation. Yeah, absolutely. And we'll talk more about the comparison thing here in just a second when we speak specifically on social media. But there's also cyberbullying as well. And we'll compare dating violence to cyberbullying, talk about the differences and the similarities and all that fun stuff. And then, of course, negative effects on self-esteem. And yeah, I really like this in the chat, the editing of images surrounding body image issues. I think that's huge, especially as like technology keeps advancing and we've got apps like Facetune, but then you've also got AI, and it's really interesting. Do any of you have any other things you want to add about some of the negative uses of technology? Because these are the three that we'll hit most on, but I'm curious to see if any of you have any you'd like us to, touch on. All right, well, if it comes up, then please feel free. Oh, that's good. They see bodies that are perfect all the time. Yeah, for sure. Photoshop or celebs, absolutely. So we're going to hold that thought because we're going to talk more about that in a second. But technology facilitated abuse. So when we're talking about this, we're talking about the misuse of technology to harm, harass, threaten, coerce, exploit, or violate a person. And there are tons of different ways somebody can do this. And you'll notice that a lot of these things are things that can happen in person, right? So you've got bullying, harassment, and spamming, image-based abuse, sextortion, impersonation, surveillance and monitoring, recruitment and defamation. And, just like Andy was saying earlier, these are old behaviors, but we just have new tools now. So with the advancement of technology, there's, it's going to make it really easy for somebody to hurt somebody else online. So let's talk about why we need to talk about this, why we need to learn about it. Like I said, let's see. Do you want to go ahead and click for me? Thank you. So like I said, teens are more impacted by this issue than any other age group, and you'll see why here in just a second. Teens are using technology daily, even if they don't have access to personal technology devices. Most schools are now, introducing Chromebooks. I mean, at least in Ogden and Weber school districts, we have students that all of them check out Chromebooks at the beginning of the year. So they're somewhat online. And like I said earlier, they are our future and they matter. So let's talk about what this looks like for teens. So we've got cyberbullying and trolling, tracking locations using Snapchat and Life360 and even Find My iPhone, forcing partners to share device and account passwords, sexting and asking for nude pictures, which, can lead to using pictures as blackmail or non-consensual or receiving non-consensual sexual images. But when I talk to my teenagers about this, in line, we talk a lot about, emotional dating abuse and verbal dating abuse. And I kind of explain this to them by saying a lot of what's happening over text messages when we're talking about digital abuse is emotional abuse. Okay. So it's threats, it's tracking your partner, forcing to share those passwords, blowing up their phone. What are you doing? Who are you with? Calling them 800 times. Why are you not answering my phone call? So some of those platforms that are used mostly to do that are, do you want to click for me? Thank you. So it's social media, obviously, can be used to stalk, harass, bully, monitor, and groom. Emails and texts, like I said, blowing up the phone, used to intimidate, threaten, harass, and bully. And then online chat rooms, which we will talk about later, but these are spaces that are extremely dangerous for young people, and they're used to groom and later exploit them. So let's see.
Let's try it.
Yeah, let's do it.
So, okay, so now we are going to I have a bunch of different examples, and I want y'all to put each example in one of these categories. You do tell me, you decide where it goes, right? So we are going to start with the first one. Teabagging, right? So I don't know if any of you have heard of teabagging. I think teabagging started with Halo, the video game Halo, and essentially it meant where you like crouched over like a opposing character's face, you know, to like literally like drop testicles on like their forehead, right? Like that, like you got owned, you're an idiot, like I got you, right? So now teabagging is a bit different. It's more casual. It's interesting to see that now teabagging is so ingrained in gaming culture that if your character can crouch in a game, that there will be teabagging. So in this scenario, it looks like the Kate dropped a pallet, the Michael Myers missed, you know, didn't get her, so she dropped a couple bags, right? So okay, so some folks say sexual assault, some folks say harassment. Yeah, it's really quite interesting, especially in video games, that one of the tactics to win is to emotionally upset your partner or your opponent, right? And so if you're facing someone and you get them angry, you are more likely to win, because they now are not thinking critically, they're getting upset, right? So let's switch to a video really quick. Let me show you. Okay, so in this video, this is a video of a character essentially being like humped in the video game. So once the survivor character is prone, they cannot get up unless they have a perk or something to do. And so essentially the opposing character, so in this case the plague, she is walking over that character multiple times, right? Now she's nodding and she's like shaking her head like, you know, and she's going to continue to do that. So this Nia, who's on the ground, she is in an exponential boon, so she can infinitely get herself up, and this player doesn't realize that. And so they there's a couple, what's the word here, bars at the top, and when those all go down, this player will finally die. But this plague character is not going to let that they're just going to let the time run out and continue to do this for a long time. So where do you think that would fall? Would that be trolling? Would it be, what do you think? So let me reshare this. Okay, so harassment, again, harassment, sexual assault. And this is a really interesting conversation right now. Can you see my screen? You can. Because a lot of people in the community, especially like the player that plays on like the plague, that they're like, oh, well, it's just the same as teabagging. So, you know, it's just considered BMing, which is just like bad manners, like having bad manner, like just being a jerk. But for a lot of people in the community, in, you know, gaming community, they're like, no, like we've been survivors of sexual assault. We're women, female feminine folks in gaming, and we've been harassed constantly. Like we're unable to play a game without being sexualized or harassed. And so this is a really big topic right now. I know that if that does happen to me in the game, that I get incredibly angry, when that happens. Okay, so the next one is using slurs or insults in-game voice chat. What is it? Trolling, bullying, intimidation, threats, harassment, stalking, sexual assault. What is that? Using slurs and insults in-game voice chat. Threats, bullying, harassment. What about flaming in-game chat? So calling people names at the end of the game that maybe someone was humping or someone was teabagging. Being rude. Maybe bullying, harassment. Maybe a little intimidation, right? What about publicly sharing private conversations? Where does that fall? Oh, bullying. Okay. Okay. What about sharing intimate images? Sharing intimate images. Ooh, trolling. Interesting. Sexual assault. Okay. What about using location services to track? Okay, stalking. What about doxing? Do you know what doxing is? So doxing is essentially when you share personal information about someone online, and yeah, you share their personal information publicly. So like, I think it just happened to, there was like a streamer that someone shared his like personal home address either in his chat or on his like YouTube in his comments. So he got doxxed, right? And so that's scary, right? Someone can come to your house, especially for women, female, feminine folks in gaming or streaming, that the danger is significant. And usually those folks have to immediately move. What about posting a comment on someone's social media about wanting to masturbate to their pictures, or even asking them for close-ups or certain pictures, or to send them a high-res version of it? Okay, assault, harassment. Okay. What about say telling someone to KYS in chat or on a social media post, which means kill yourself? What is that? Mm. Okay, so I'll do one more. So saying get back in the kitchen or make me a sandwich to a female game player or social media, on someone's social media. Because I will tell you, that's the one that I probably hear the most for like female gamers reporting, is that other folks within the chat or something will say, get back in the kitchen or make me a sandwich. And it's really interesting too, because we see articles online that are like, hey, how to, rise above the bullying or the trolling in your chat, your stream chat, and they're literally just women and female gamers just saying that, usually I try to ignore it, I'll mute chat, but when it gets to the point where it's just too much, then I just stop playing. So essentially, women just stop playing games. That's the option, right? One of the big issues, especially with like gaming and social media, is that their reporting systems are ineffective, right? And they're ineffective in the way that the policies don't capture things and don't understand the nuances of harassment, bullying, stalking and sexual assault, but also in the way that there's thousands, millions of reports that come in, and someone has to sort through that. And yeah, they do a lot of AI stuff, which obviously doesn't work very well. But yeah, so there's, we've said it before, we said it again, that the internet is essentially the Wild West, right? If it happens on the internet, it's very difficult to see real world implications and accountability. Someone says it all is numbing people to think that they can do it or treat others this way outside the game. Yeah. It's really easy to be a jerk and do some of these things, especially in like games, because that other player is an anonymous, I can't say that word, username, right? We don't know who it is. We can't see that it's another person, right? And it makes it really hard to connect with that person on a human level. So these behaviors oftentimes don't seem that bad. I put trolling on here as a little troll, right? Because none of these are trolling. Trolling is just a word that's used to minimize things like bullying, intimidation, threats, harassment, stalking, and sexual assault, right? You say, oh, he's just a troll, like ignore him. Like, that's what we tell victims when they're being harassed by someone on a college campus, right? That's victim blaming. That's, hey, just move on, like don't let him get to you, right? When in reality, that person needs to be held accountable, right? So yeah, trolling, that word is just completely invalidating, and it is just glossing over all of these abusive behaviors and tactics that people do. So, okay.
All right, cool. So when it comes to social media, a large majority of teens are participating in some form of social media. So 95% of teens 13 to 17 years old are using YouTube, which when I was doing my research, I was like, YouTube's a form of social media. I just think of it as like a video platform, like influencer type vlogging, gaming, fun stuff like that. But I guess, I mean, and Andy, you might know better than me. I don't know if we had talked about this, but does YouTube have like a chat center or like platform?
So like you can post comments, and then like if someone like live streams, they can have a chat going and people can participate just like with Twitch. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. So a lot of them are watching YouTube videos, okay? And 2/3 of teens report using TikTok, which to me is not that surprising. 62% are on Instagram and 59% use Snapchat. And then of course you've got smaller groups of teens that are using things like Twitter or X, I'm going to call it Twitter, and Twitch and WhatsApp and Reddit and Tumblr. Yeah. Do you want to add anything to that, Andy?
Oh, let's see. Someone said, I hate YouTube. I hate video games. I want to block it out of my house so bad. Yeah. And that's a common response, is that we just want to get rid of it. Right. And it can be really hard to learn about those things that we dislike, that we hate. Right. And the thing, is that our kids, our teens, the folks around us are using that. And so how do we help educate them on how to use it more safely, right? Like when I play video games, like I used to play Call of Duty, which is so funny. Like if you know me, you're like, what? I played on PlayStation 3, so okay. But as soon as I would only play multiplayer for some reason, I guess it was a weird time in my life. But as soon as I got into a match, I would turn off all of the I would mute everyone in there because I didn't want to hear them say, I mean, it only took 1 or 2 games for them to say all these terrible things, that I was never going to have it again, right? And so I only use voice comms with my friends, people that I know, that I care about, and that I trust.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I actually, funny enough, I started playing Call of Duty during COVID and I experienced the same thing. I was like, yeah, I'm never doing that again. Will
Like,
not
nope.
doing it.
And and it's interesting too, because when you go on like YouTube, there's a popular like genre of gaming video where it's where they're salt farmers. So essentially they play like, they BM a lot. They're really rude. They're really mean in game. They're toxic. And then they wait for end game chat, or they wait for people to talk and be angry about that. And they record it and then they post it in videos online. Right. So yeah, there's a number. I play on Steam, most of my games on Steam on PC. And when you go against someone who's kind of, who's just playing really scummy, you can look at their profile and oftentimes you'll see that they're a salt farmer. And they just have screenshots of all these things that people have said, and they do it to piss people off. And that's really unfortunate. I mean, it's not everyone, right? Because obviously I've made, a lot of great friends, and the research shows that kids, make friendships and build those strong connections. But, it takes a needle in a haystack to ruin that haystack, right?
Yep. Okay, so a large majority of teens say they have access to different devices. So 72% of US teens say they have access to a smartphone, a computer, and a gaming console at home. So this means all 3 of those things. So they have access to completely different types of media, completely different types of, relationship connections. And more than half of teens say it would be difficult for them to give up social media. And every time I present this to teenagers, all of them try to fight me on it. They're like, no, it'd be so easy. I'm like, you guys are lying to me and yourselves. There's no way. And And then they kind of come around and you're like, yeah, you know what? I can't not have TikTok. I need it to idly scroll or do whatever. And a lot of teens too need multiple, how do I say this? Multiple things happening all at once. So like they'll have, a game, they'll be playing a game, they'll be watching a YouTube video at the same time, they'll be on the phone with their friends, all of these things happening all at once. Or it could be something as simple as like, they're eating by themselves. They're going to pull up maybe a YouTube video on their computer. They're going to be scrolling through TikTok at the same time. So they're consuming a lot of these things all at once, which can be very overwhelming, and contributes to the idea of like, the increase of depression and anxiety and other self-esteem issues that come with that, because it's all coming at them all at once. So in the context of relationships, all of these things are being influenced by social media, and so are their expectations. So you've got things on TikTok, like want to know if they like you, they'll do XYZ. If your partner does this, they're thinking about ending things. Hashtag relationship goals, hashtag trad wife. You've got beige flags, situationships, sneaky links, and then of course, romanticizing abuse through media. So let's talk about this.
Can you define beige flags, so situationships, and sneaky links?
Yeah, definitely. Beige flags are like those in between. How do I word this? So it's like things that aren't necessarily like a deal breaker. They're not bright red flags, right? They're just things that might, I don't know. What was the beige flag? Didn't somebody call you beige flag?
Yeah. So I've heard two different definitions of it. Is that when like someone in a relationship does something that's kind of unusual, but it's cute. Yeah. So like if I like, for a partner, if I like just randomly bake her a cake, but it's a cake of like the cat food bag, right? And she's like, that's cute, but that's also like kind of weird. Like someone also said that beige flags is like things that a partner does that are kind of boring. Like they're cute, but they're kind of like, that partner's kind of boring. So they're not like bad things necessarily. They're just like, okay, oh, okay. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's hard to define.
Yes. Situationships are relationships that aren't really relationships. So it's somebody that a person is talking to with no commitment, but they like treat each other like they are committed to each other. So it gets very confusing and stressful for teenagers, because like I said, they're navigating these new relationships and they're like seeing all these red flags, but they might think, they're going to come around. They're going to want to be with me eventually. I'm going to stay in this situationship because they like me. I like them. It's just not our time yet. When in reality, that's not healthy and can contribute to like those unhealthy relationship behaviors and even dating abuse. And then sneaky links are, okay. So a sneaky link is somebody that essentially you sneak around with, I guess, is a simple way to put it. So in teen terms, it'd be like somebody that, not very many people know about. It's kind of on the down low, and, you go hang out with them and you can make out, you do whatever, but it's something that is not a committed relationship. It's usually just physical. So yeah, so that covers all three of those. Do you want to talk about trad wife?
Yeah, someone posted that in chat. So trad wife, it is this hashtag of like this traditional wife kind of community on TikTok. And it's essentially usually it's like anti-feminist, like, feminists don't want me to be able to make dinner for my family, or it's essentially just like women, mostly like white heterosexual women, who show them getting ready for their husband, making their husband's meals, and the importance of doing things for him so that he doesn't get stressed out, keeping the house clean, waiting for him by the door when he comes home, doing his laundry, like whatever, basically just waiting on him hand and foot. So yeah, someone said think 1950s. So it's kind of like romanticizing inequality and essentially the 1950s and the women lacking autonomy and independence. And so yeah, it's, again, I think Haley's going to talk about this in a minute too, like just like relationship standards, how kids are seeing what the standard is for relationships, attraction, and emotions on social media. And yeah, that one's pretty wild.
Yeah, I also too, I want to add, so a lot of those videos, like at least on TikTok about trad wives, is it's like they film it as like, oh, the day in the life of, being a stay-at-home mom or being a stay-at-home wife. And they kind of like bring you throughout their day, which,
oh yes.
yeah. So like you said, pretty much all the examples you gave, which, here's me getting up at 4 a.m. to make my husband his lunch and breakfast before he goes to work, all those sorts of things. It's kind of like a day in the life type vlog, but very, very short compared to like a YouTube video.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very interesting. And like, yeah, how cute it is for your husband to eat his food that you just made him and to leave the table and not clean up after himself. And then how much you just love him because you just love doing his dishes. And yeah, it's really quite interesting.
So we want to know what you all think about this. What have you noticed about these trends? Where are they coming from? Who is making them? And how can they be problematic? And I know we've talked about several of those ways that these things can be problematic, like influencing relationship behaviors and expectations, but also the way we treat other people, specifically online. So I want to hear from some of you about what you think.
Yeah, type into chat. What do you think? People are stumped. They're stumped. They don't know. It's hard. I think especially where these trends come from can be really difficult because it literally just starts with one video that a bunch of people see and then it becomes viral.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think a lot of where these trends are coming from is, I think it's very damaging. I think it's super damaging as well. And a lot of these trends are coming from teens who are consuming certain types of media and they're twisting it into like their own version of it, making it a little more unique and then rolling with it. And like Andy said, these videos become viral. Let's see. Continues the generational cycle of women being used and abused and not realistic and unhealthy. Yeah, I think those are fantastic points and sums that up pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, think about like the 1980s and like fashion magazines and stuff like that. And now we don't have fashion magazines, we have fashion social media accounts.
Yep.
Right.
Okay,
right.
Cool. So we're going to do something a little fun again. I'm going to put up some images of couples from mostly, all of these couples are straight couples. So this is like a lot of the content that younger teens who identify as straight are consuming. So we've got Edward and Bella. Obviously, is this a healthy example of what a relationship looks like? Yeah, abusive as heck, for sure. This is Gossip Girl. I don't know who all has seen this show. I personally haven't, but I do know that these two are very, very toxic with each other. They break up 800 times throughout the show and then get married the last episode. So not great. This is The Summer I Turned Pretty. This is pretty new. This came out a couple months ago and it was huge on TikTok. But it's a love triangle, kind of like Twilight, but it's two brothers and their childhood best friend. It is very, very confusing. This is After. This is a movie. It's based on a book that a lot of, younger I won't tell you how I know this. This is embarrassing, but After is based off of a Harry Styles fan fiction that became a published book with the names changed and then started a movie. So a lot of these younger girls who are fans of these people are reading these fan fictions that end up becoming huge franchises. And the movie itself and the main characters are in an extremely abusive relationship, and it might seem like it's just so passionate and so raw, but in reality, like from an adult perspective, knowing what we know, that is absolutely not okay. We've got To All the Boys I Loved Before. You've got those different tropes. These two are fake dating in this show, so they end up falling in love, obviously, but there's another unrealistic expectation. We've got Book Talk. Do any of you know what Book Talk is? Are any of you on Book Talk? This is kind of what I was talking about when I brought up the
Trying to out people. Hey, is anyone on Book Talk?
Anybody on Book Talk?
I love it.
Book Talk. But yeah, this is what I was kind of talking about when we brought up romanticizing abuse. A lot of these books are old. They're for older people, right? I shouldn't say old, mature is what I'm trying to say. A lot of these books are very mature, and teenagers are, having access to these things. They can go to Target. Target's super trendy. You can go to Barnes and Nobles. If you're on TikTok, you probably love, or Book Talk, you probably love Barnes and Nobles, which is great, or local bookstores. But they see these books that are very mature, have a lot of sexual content, and a lot of them depict abusive or unhealthy relationships. And when teenagers are consuming that type of media, even though they might think they're like, oh no, I know this is wrong, they're still kind of like taking in what's happening and somewhat normalizing it because they are reading so often, which is a problem. And then the Vampire Diaries, we've got another love triangle, super, super unhealthy. Not gonna lie, love the show, but it's unhealthy. Very unhealthy.
Yeah, it's really interesting too, because you mentioned like these, are generally what, heterosexual children kind of get exposed to, but in reality, like the lack of queer representation means that, this is what queer folks see. That queer and trans kids, they see, these really unhealthy heterosexual relationships, and they don't have standards oftentimes for them in relationships and attraction in the media. And it's really interesting because, why don't we go over some? So like, what about Brokeback Mountain? Right? Is this toxic? Right? What about when we think about it in context of the time that, these two men were in that relationship, right? How would they be able to navigate that relationship, right, in rural America? What about Heartstopper, right? Is this healthy? Is it toxic, right? What about Our Flag Means Death, right? We have older men, right, in a romantic relationship, right? What about Moonlight, right? What about Schitt's Creek, right? Right?
Schitt's Creek.
Right? Healthy, unhealthy, right? What about The Last of Us TV show, right? If you've played the game, the way that Bill and Frank were depicted was a bit different. Like, Bill has always been gay in the game. But the way that it was depicted was different. Like, Bill and Frank, they essentially were just two men who, liked to be with other men, and they were in a post-apocalyptic world, and they didn't particularly care for each other. But in the show, they really brought out this connection that these two men had. And and so what about trans characters, right? What about Euphoria? I know that I could, just say the word Euphoria, and people go off on all the things that they've heard about the show. Maybe some people have seen it, right? But we have a trans character, right? What about Sense8? We have a sapphic trans couple, right? Have we even heard of these? Have we even seen these, right? What about Shameless, right? We have a trans mask person with a cisgender male, right? What about Pose? has a lot of trans actors, a lot of trans characters, right? What about Supergirl? So Supergirl has a trans superhero, and she, you know, for many seasons has a relationship with one of the cisgender characters, right? And they even have a whole storyline on anti-trans violence in that show, right? So my wheelhouse, sapphic couples, right? So I don't know if any of you have seen Dickinson, right? So it's great that we're starting to see more and more stories and shows on the reality of Emily Dickinson, right? She was, seen as a, what do they call it? An angry gal. I can't think of the word. Is it spinster? Where she just kind of lived alone and kind of was depressed and anxious and wrote poetry and all this stuff. And it turned out that she did have, a relationship with Sue, right? There's a book, I think it's like Read Me Carefully, and it's all of the her poems to Sue. It's a huge book. Yeah. The Owl House. It was a Disney cartoon that came out a couple years ago. I think it had a couple seasons. It did get canceled, and they had a bisexual character and I believe a lesbian character who began a relationship. First Kill is this classic vampire hunter and vampire kind of fall in love, right? But with a sapphic twist, with a lesbian twist, right? The Last of Us 2, right? Dina and Ellie, is that a healthy relationship? Is it an unhealthy relationship? Again, what about the context of living in a post-apocalyptic world as a queer woman, right? Arcane, right? So Kate and Vi, again, sapphic yearning at its finest, breaking up before they're even together, right? Is this healthy, unhealthy, right? Katradora from She-Ra, the reboot of She-Ra, right? Best friends to enemies to lovers, right? Is it healthy? Is it unhealthy? Have we seen it, right? Legend of Korra, right? Korra and Asami, right? Best friends to lovers, to literally perfect couple. They're super adorable, right? Especially in the comics, right? So notice how there were no chats during any of those queer and trans couples, right? So why do we think it's because we're just unaware of queer and trans couples and characters and people in media? Do we not engage in it, or is there no representation? I mean, I am a person who specializes in working with LGBTQIA plus survivors, so of course I would know a lot of these different things, but think about that. Where are our queer and trans youth? Where are they seeing people like them, right?
And I want to add to that really quickly. We had a conversation about this a couple weeks ago with my position at, I'm going into high schools. And I work with one other person. We are not allowed to even talk about gay relationships. We can't ask for pronouns. I think it's written on like the sex ed form. It says that you cannot advocate for LGBTQ plus relationships, which is very, very unfortunate because we know that there are kids in our classrooms that are not straight. And so it makes it really hard for us to reach them on a personal level, such as this, when we can't even provide any examples. What we can do is equip them with like, here's what healthy and unhealthy looks like. But we know there are some unique challenges and very unique differences between those types of relationships. So it does make it hard. And in trying to connect with that. So I appreciate the work that you do, Andy.
You're very kind. And yeah, it's really interesting because like, it sounds like the no promo homo law is back, where we couldn't the old terms was couldn't advocate for homosexuality, and then we got rid of it, and so now we had a little bit of leeway, and now it's back again, right? And so we have just so many anti-trans, anti-queer legislation and anti-free speech. I mean, we're banning books right now, folks. We're banning books. How do you think that's going to affect our young folks? How do you think that's affecting people today, especially queer folks and communities of color? Because those are the communities that are being targeted. All right. All right.
Okay, so let's talk about Instagram. So there are a lot of unrealistic expectations that teens are learning through different social medias, but specifically with Instagram, you've got body image. And someone wrote in the chat a little bit earlier of like, editing pictures to make you look a certain way. You've got clear skin, a nice body, whatever that means. And you've got, all these sort of like, what's the word? These expectations of what you're supposed to look like in order to be considered, beautiful or handsome or whatever. You've got different lifestyles all over the place. You have influencers that are like, they're sharing their lives. Some do the good, some do the bad, some do a little bit of both, but it can get very confusing about, what's the word I'm looking for? I'll come back to it if I remember it. But yeah, it can get confusing and, add to those unrealistic expectations. Of course, we've talked about relationships and the examples that they have within the media, but also like posting your significant other, and flirting over social media, liking a post, you can comment, you can DM, slide into the DMs, and then emotions, right? So how you're supposed to respond to certain things that are online. And this could be with social issues, this could be with personal, with people that in your life, personal experiences, things like that, who you're supposed to be attracted to, who you're not supposed to be attracted to, what's acceptable to like, what's acceptable not to like. There's a lot going on online. And then TikTok has all the things, which is super fun. You've got relationship goals. We talked about Tradwife. We talked about book talk. Gen Z loves to film strangers for content, which is wild to me. It's so wild. Whether it be for like, hey, I think you look really pretty. Can I take some pictures of you? I'm a photographer. Or it's just like you're filming a random group of people or somebody that you think is doing something weird or they're doing something funny, and then you post it having no idea who this person is, for content. And then you've got dangerous pranks and viral challenges. I'm sure we all remember the Tide Pod challenge, but unfortunately. But then we came across one last year where kids were like challenging each other to break the sinks in their school bathrooms, which got them in a lot of trouble. Like, we were at a school last year where a kid broke a sink, and this past year we had some kids online from South Ogden Junior High dare another kid to light the paper towel dispenser on fire, and we all literally had to evacuate, and this was a couple months ago. And the fire department showed up. So things can get very dangerous very, very fast. Then you've got, this is just an example of some of those TikToks, what they look like. Girls, if a guy really likes you, he'll constantly assume that all the guys you speak to have the same intentions as him because he thinks they see what he sees in you, which, wow, there's a lot to unpack there. And then signs of girls like you. Sign a girl, wow, I can't read. She is always mean to you, best riz from us. Always talks to you as a friend with some flirty jokes. This means she likes you. Blushes a lot when people ship you both. Not mean, but in a flirty way. Looks at you and smiles, then looks away when she sees you looking at her. Your soulmate pops up after you follow me, which is, just a way to get people to consume these things. And obviously, I don't have the expectation that like high school students are consuming these and taking these seriously. I think we need to give them more credit than that. But like junior high kids, they're saying these things. I have cousins that are in junior high, siblings, and, they'll repost things like this. And when we ask them about it, they're like, well, yeah, like okay, well, we need to have a conversation about this because this is influencing the way that you're viewing relationships and how you're interacting with the people that you have romantic interest in. Because it can get, like I said, it gets confusing.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting too. Remember that Gen Z lack the socialization, like the socialization with other folks, to the level that like millennials, Gen X, and so on and so forth had. Is that when I was a kid, when I was born in the 80s, that we didn't have a computer at the house. I didn't have a computer until, the late 2000s, right? And so if you wanted to hang out with someone, if you wanted to see someone, you had to walk over to their house, right? And we didn't play online games with each other because the Super Nintendo did not have online capabilities. And so we would sit in a room together and play games. We would play outside. There just wasn't technology really available. And me as a kid, I didn't want to play games. Like that was like, whatever. Like my mom played games, which is hilarious, but I didn't want to play games. Right. And now I do want to play games and don't want to go outside. But so think about how like all these things, like a sign a girl who likes you, like these are literally just examples of people interacting with each other, right? But because there's that different level of that socialization that folks have had, that they are seeing just regular everyday interactions too means something else as well. And also, again, as culture changes and as we go on, in time, is that things do change. So the body language and the way that we interact with folks does change, and it will change. And we are seeing that it is actually changing with Gen Z as well. So if that makes sense.
Definitely. Okay, so we're going to kind of switch gears. We're going to talk about online chat rooms. So for those of you who haven't heard of Omegle, Omegle is an app. Well, it was. They recently just killed it. It no longer exists. This happened like 2 weeks ago. But up until then, Omegle was an app and also like an online chatting browser where you can interact with complete total strangers from around the world over text, audio, or even video chat, which is very scary for teenagers, especially because they were being exposed to nudity and other explicit content. And unfortunately, the video and chats are completely unmonitored. And once the chat has ended, they're gone. You can't retrieve them. 47% of teens were using Omegle to video chat with other people that they don't know on a regular basis. And I think there's something to say too. I'm unsure if this is, they're doing these things with friends or if they're doing them by themselves. I think it's a pretty good mix. Because I'm sure, teenagers influence each other to do these sorts of things. They think it's funny, and then they're being exposed to nude images and all these, and hate content and all these horrible things. The wild thing about most online chat rooms is they do have an age requirement. If you're with Omegle specifically, if you were above 13, you could use it with parental consent. And really all you had to do was click a button that says I'm 18 or have parental consent, and then you're in. There is no age enforcement mechanism that is enforced to keep those kids off this platform.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I love it that there's just a little click box to click if you have parental consent. It's like, oh yeah, for sure, my mom's totally cool with this.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so then we've got Kik, which is pretty similar to, well, it's like a mix between, we'll talk about Discord in a second. It's pretty similar to Discord, but it's also pretty similar to Omegle. It's a messaging app that also, you can remain anonymous on. It is one of the least safe messaging apps that is available currently. And the concerning thing is 75% of its user base are people 14 to 24 years old. And like Omegle, you can chat with strangers who share similar interests. You can enter chat rooms with a bunch of people. Kik has a very scary history of cyberbullying, child grooming, and even murder. So Nicole Level was a 13-year-old girl who met, I believe he was 24, met this 24-year-old guy on Kick, and they ended up, having some form of a friendship. At least she thought it was a friendship. She trusted him. He gained her trust. And eventually he convinced her to leave her house and go meet him. And unfortunately, she was assaulted and she was murdered and left on the side of the road because of him and his girlfriend. And they were caught. But this was a 13-year-old girl, who, I mean, that is so young. And she was unaware of what was happening to her. And it's a real slippery slope, especially with teenagers. If you feel any form of, isolation, or you're feeling lonely, or you need a friend, or whatever that is, and someone online approaches you and wants to be that for you, a younger person is more likely to trust that, because to them it might feel like there's no consequences, or that they're old enough, or somebody, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, but somebody who is older complimenting them and saying, you just seem so much older for your age. There's no way you're actually 13. You're so beautiful. I'm going to protect you. They make all these promises when in reality, but kids are being put in some very dangerous situations because they have access to these apps and they don't really know how to navigate them.
Yeah. So Discord.
Take it away.
I mean, if any of you've ever used like Slack for your job, Slack or Discord is like the gamer, version of Slack essentially. So yeah, Discord, you basically, create your own like server, and then you can chat with folks. You can invite people. You can make it private. You can do it by invite only, stuff like that. But servers have audio and chat capabilities. So for example, in my gaming server, I have like 5 or 6 voice chat rooms. And so when, there's multiple groups that are playing games, maybe some are playing Ghosts and the other are playing, DVDs, so that we can kind of separate. Or there are times that, hey, we all just want to be together and chat, right? I know that it's cool that I can just pop into a voice chat and within 5 minutes, 2 or 3, 4 other people pop in. It's like, oh, hey, how you doing? Sure, let's jump on some games, And so that's really cool, right? But then also sometimes there are people that, hey, maybe you don't want to game with, or you just don't want to hear their voice anymore. And so that could be hard too. But, minors can connect with people that they don't know in public servers or in private chats, right? So you do have to accept a friend invitation before you can private message folks, which is, a nice little barrier. But folks can still connect with each other. There's a lot of public servers, especially for gaming. Like there's a lot of streamers that they'll have, a public Discord. And so basically anyone who has a link to that can join. And so, age groups are just mixing, right? Yeah, but I mean, you can receive a friend, invitation from anyone, but it's interesting too, because like in a lot of like streamers chats, like on like Twitch, they'll specifically have rules, and in their Discord, that you can't talk about age. And so like you can't talk about your age or anything to like help protect you. And so that's kind of interesting that that's what they're kind of trying to do to stop people from trying to violate other people. And I wonder if it's even that effective, right?
Right.
So we've talked about in-game voice chat. We've talked about in-game text chat a little bit. So many games do have the ability to chat in-game, to voice chat in-game, especially multiplayer games, FPS, first-person shooters. I know some more, some scary games that came out, like I think Texas Chainsaw Massacre, they have built-in voice chat, right? And you can go on YouTube and watch the videos of people just being salty and just going off on random players for no reason. It's wild. But it can be good in a game where you need to strategize, where you have to work as a team, and like, okay, I'm over here, I'm in main, I'm by Shack or whatever, and then you can kind of coordinate and get the objectives done. Great. It's to help other players, stuff like that. But then also we have, again, the possibility of abuse, right? You can, I think in all games, I don't know of a game that you can't do this. but usually you can mute other players, right? But for like end game chat at the, chat at the end, console players generally don't have access to that. It's usually only PC players. And so, folks sometimes are like if they like die in a game, and so they're waiting in the lobby and they're like, oh, they're console, and it's like, oh, we can't flame chat, after, right? But also, a lot of online games are MMR based, so matchmaking rank. And so essentially people of the quote unquote same skill level get matched with each other to play games. And if they have in-game voice chat, then that means that a 10-year-old who's playing on Xbox can talk to a 40-year-old who's playing on computer or on PlayStation. And so that in itself can be a problem, right? We talked a little bit before of being able to use some of this software like Omegle, and it's all you have to do is say, oh yeah, my parents said it was okay, and it's like, gosh, is that really working? Do you want to watch this, or do you want to?
Let's skip it.
Okay.
Okay, so let's talk about the intersections of online dating abuse, or offline dating abuse. So students who have experienced some form of abuse online are likely to have experienced some abuse offline, which makes a lot of sense. They're also, students who are victimized offline are approximately 18 times more likely to have also experienced online abuse, which, it makes a lot of sense, especially if like some of our expectations aren't super high. We talk to students all the time, like if they haven't had super great examples of what a healthy relationship looks like, they've, got to kind of do the work, and it can be hard work, but sometimes they don't always know that what's happening is not okay, whether they're the one mistreating somebody or they're the one being mistreated. So this makes a lot of sense. So we've got certain risk factors that come with students who are likely to be victimized online. So students with depressive symptoms are 4 times as likely to experience some form of digital dating abuse. Those who have had sexual intercourse were 2.5 times more likely. Students who are sexting are nearly 5 times likely to be the target of some form of abuse. And then students who have been the target of cyberbullying are also likely to have been the target of digital dating abuse. So dating, this is a slide that we use with our students. Dating is hard enough as it is. And like I said, it can be very awkward. It's supposed to be fun. But these are new relationships. So we always ask them, what's the golden rule? What do you guys think is the golden rule? What is it?
I got excited. Sorry.
That's okay. It's okay. We can talk about it. It's treat others the way you want to be treated, right? And so we'll ask students, is this happening at your school when it comes to dating? And a lot of the times they're saying no. And when I do this presentation, I'm like, is this happening online between your peers, whether it's romantic or not? A lot of the times they say no. Because, Gen Z, I think, is pretty funny. They come up with a lot of silly content and slang and, just silly things. They're very funny. But I think a lot of the times we walk the line of what's funny and what's being taken too far. Are we hurting other people's feelings? Are we attacking somebody's identity? We're walking a very, very, very fine line between that. So we talk to them about how it's important to treat others with respect and kindness, and everybody deserves to feel some form of safety in their relationships. Well, just safety in general, not some form. They deserve to feel safe in their relationships.
It's funny, when we were updating this presentation, I saw this. When guys show you a YouTube video, you have to understand that's a sign of great respect in their culture.
Oh, it's funny. That's great. So here's some teen relationship realities. 88% of teens say that they like to text. That's their preferred form of communication. 8% of teens report dating someone they first met online. 1 in 5 young people are happy to have online only romances. And I can somewhat see where this is coming from, because I put myself in my junior high shoes, and I was so incredibly awkward. I liked people, but I wanted nothing to do with that. I didn't want to I was not going to talk to them at school. Absolutely not. But if we could text, that'd be great. That'd be totally fine. Anyway,
I love that.
I know.
You're like, I like you, but I literally don't want to like interact with you. Can we just text?
Literally, I can't handle the pressure. Can't do it. Teens are less likely to feel isolated when interacting with peers. And then social media is the easiest way to interact with love interest. And I think a lot of this too, not only with, social media and technology advancing, but I'm going to take it back to the pandemic too, when they were forced to have online interactions consistently. Now we are even more chronically online than we were before. So it makes sense that they feel comfortable here. All right, so these are some of that dating abuse statistics that happen online. 1 in 4 teens in a relationship have been called names. They've experienced dating abuse, which is the same statistic for dating abuse in general for teenagers. In Utah, it's even worse. It's 1 in 3. 40% of people aged 14 to 24 have experienced tech abuse. And then more than 1 in 4 people aged 14 to 24 say their boyfriend or girlfriend has checked their text messages on their phone without permission. And I talk to our students a lot about this, because the general consensus that I have gathered is a lot of students, and this is, because of the content they're consuming and, they're being influenced by their friends and other creators, that they somewhat feel like they have some form of a right to have access to their partner's text messages, their pictures, their DMs, whenever they want to, which is not the case. Those are, your private messages, your private pictures. And, when we're talking to students, like, your phone password is for you and probably your parents. So that shouldn't be happening with boyfriends and girlfriends and partners. So this was a research project done by the Cyberbullying Research Center in 2010. But they had a good chunk of students, 11 to 18-year-olds, that were asked a number of questions about their dating experiences, particularly online. And they found that 12% of them actually experienced some form of tech-facilitated dating abuse, which I found. Well, let's talk about the difference between tech-facilitated dating abuse and cyberbullying. I want to know what y'all think. What are those differences? Because I did say there are a lot of similarities, but there are also some differences. So what do you think? The relationship is different. Yeah, absolutely it is. In what ways is the relationship different? Yeah, one is closer to in-person violence. Yeah, for sure. Do you want to click the next slide and we can talk about it? Yeah, so with tech-facilitated dating abuse, the individuals have some form of attraction towards each other. They want to be next to each other. With cyberbullying, they don't usually like each other. They don't want to be around each other, but both employ technology. They're both using these things. They are also, well, peers know each other if we're assuming that the people that they're dating are people in their school or in a neighboring school. They both have detrimental and long-term consequences, and they both use similar tactics to cause harm. And this could be through harassment and everything we've talked about. So yeah, it can look like other forms of victimization online, but like you said in the chat, it occurs in a context where, the people want to flirt and they're romantic with each other. So this is unique. This is a unique violation of trust and care towards the other person. So within this study, a lot of youth said that their partner has prevented them from using a cell phone. Their partner has posted something to embarrass them online, threaten them. A lot of them said that they've received threatening cell phone messages from their romantic partner, or that their romantic partner has uploaded or shared humiliating or harassing pictures of them online or over text. So what I mean by over text is that they're sending it in larger quantities. So the abusive partner is going to send it to, their friends, or maybe in a group chat or whatever that may be. When it comes to offending, though, I found this pretty interesting. 7% of youth admitted to preventing their dating partner from using their phone or other devices. They also admitted to everything we just talked about, posting things to embarrass their partner, threaten them, and humiliate them online or over text. And then at the end, we've got, how is this affecting our relationships, right? So do you want to click the next slide? Thank you. So youth who are cyberbullied are more likely to experience digital dating abuse, and youth who admitted to being that abusive partner also admit to engage in cyberbullying. And, we've got those intersections. They're very similar. So that makes a lot of sense. And youth who share their passwords with their romantic partner are 3 times more likely to be victims of tech facilitated dating abuse. And, this is for obvious reasons, because, they have access to the victim or survivor's personal information whenever they want it.
All right, now we get to talk about some fun words. We've gone over language and different vernacular throughout the presentation, and so why don't we third time's a charm, right? So I mean, how many of you have heard of these terms? Floating, soaking, docking, dock and talk, parking, marinating. I've heard of like the Provo push, the Provo float is another word for those. Right? I know there's so many terms. And it's interesting because a lot of different areas, these are pretty regional terms, to Utah, but you may hear them somewhere else. But yeah, like floating, soaking are probably the most common ones, right? And so essentially it's ways of describing sex that folks are having that they're not seeing as real sex, quote unquote real sex. So sometimes I've heard it being described 2 different ways, where penis is inserted in vagina, it just kind of chills there. It doesn't, there's no thrusting, it's just kind of like vibing. So you're just like docking and talking. And then also, I mean, the only way I really can figure out how to describe this is like, think of like a hot dog in a bun, right? And so penis kind of just like chills between labia. It's not being inserted. It's just kind of like chilling there. And so I think like kids don't understand that this is sex, right? That they are having sex, and that the risk for STI infection and even pregnancy are still there, right? So yeah, it's really, really quite interesting. I don't know if any of you remember, a couple years ago, how there was some concern that young folks were having, there was an increase in anal sex being reported. And it was for that reason, is that anal sex wasn't seen as quote unquote real sex, and that you're still a virgin if you only have anal sex. When, honey, anal sex is for sure real sex. Oral sex is for sure real sex, right? But see how folks who maybe live in a community culture that doesn't allow, to have these conversations, or, maybe abstinence only is the only conversations that we have, no sex ed, stuff like that really creates a situation where kids are like, I know that I can't have sex, but I want to do things. So how can I figure out how to do that without having actual sex, right? And so obviously there's a problem there, right? Not only in communication, the way that we're supporting kids, but also in the lack of information that kids have. Like STIs and pregnancy, those are real things. Those are real things,
Okay, so we're going to switch gears. We're going to talk about sexting a little bit. We know that's the sharing of sexually explicit images, videos, or messages through electronic means. And believe it or not, I mean, I'm sure we can all believe it, but teens are sexting a lot. They're sexting. Regardless of, what's being taught in schools, they're experimenting, and that can be kind of a tricky situation, especially when there are legal consequences involved, but I'll share some statistics with you. So we've got, let's see, we've got 1 in 4 teens are receiving these texts, 1 in 7 are sending, 1 in 12 have been forwarded these explicit text messages without consent, and 1 in 10 are the ones forwarding those text messages without consent. So there are several consequences to sexting, and we have a list, and I'm sure this doesn't even begin to cover it. But from what I have read and what I've researched and what's been going on, we've got. Do you want to click? Thank you. So we've got, once a picture or a message is sent, you have zero control over who is going to see that. That no longer belongs to you. Even if you trust the other person, maybe it does just live on their phone or their device. You still, that's on somebody else's device at this point. You might develop unrealistic expectations of sexual partners and relationships. We've had teens talk to us about this a little bit, where they're sexting a partner, a romantic partner, and then they get in person, and one of them has the expectation that those things that were described or that they talked about are actually going to happen, and the other person is not comfortable with that, which can cause conflict, but it can also cause scarier things like rape and sexual assault. Transmitting naked pictures, obviously, of a minor is child pornography, and it is illegal. Promises of confidentiality can be unkept, especially after a breakup. If it was rough, teenagers can be pretty impulsive. They might start sharing these images or sending them to other people. They might seek revenge by posting these photos online. So the sharing of non-consensual images. And then, they're going to have those, those feelings of like maybe guilt or humiliation and anxiety and depression and thoughts of suicide even, which can be kind of scary because, if you're a teenager and you just experience something like this, it might feel really scary and, not even doable to talk to an adult about it. Because you're feeling all of these things, you're scared you're going to get in trouble. You're also embarrassed about what happened. So then they kind of like deal with these things on their own, and they kind of have to sit with that when their support, there are resources that can help them and they can be supported. But as a teenager, it's going to feel like your world just got really small, really small. So yeah, there's some pretty serious consequences of sexting. Impersonation. This one's fun. So we've got, obviously, if you've heard the term catfishing, this is pretty much what it is: using another identity for malicious purposes. Okay. So this could be for romance, it could be whatever. Specifically with teens, what we've seen is a trend going around on TikTok. I guess this has kind of died down within the last month or so, but so this TikToker in particular, I don't actually know their name, but what they were doing is they were offering to their followers, their viewers, to, message their partners, more specifically their boyfriends, to give them a loyalty test. And then if they passed, well, they'll screenshot it, and, they either pass or they don't pass. And then that kind of determines where the relationship's going to go. But then they also make videos posting all of these conversations online. And so we'll always ask teenagers, we're like, do you think this is healthy? Do you think this is normal? And, right off the bat, they tell us no, but there are teens and even older adults that are closer to my age that are still participating in these types of trends. And, they're very, very unhealthy and potentially pretty dangerous. Okay, so now we'll talk about predators, and I'm just going to give a trigger warning for this, because this can be a very heavy topic. So if you feel uncomfortable, please feel free to, we'd love for you to stay, but if you need to leave, we want you to take care of yourself first. So just keep that in mind as we go through this section. But predators, they are adults who are on the internet to exploit children and use teens for sexual and violent purposes. So this looks like child grooming, wanting them to engage in sexual activities, unwanted exposure of materials and pictures, online harassment, and then threats to cause fear or embarrassment. And a lot of this too could look like You know, you start talking to somebody online and then you realize, oh, this is probably not somebody I should be talking to. So then the person's going to say, you know what, I'm going to kill myself if you don't talk to me, or I'm going to kill myself, so that the teenager is going to be that person for them, because they don't want, to lose this minor for, their own selfish reasons. But I'll show you guys some statistics. So when we're talking about online predators, I'm going to use the term ACM, which stands for adults contacting minors. And they can do this at any point in time all over the world without actually ever touching them. 20% of kids have been sexually solicited online, and 75% of them didn't tell a parent. And 90% of those parents are never going to know of these interactions. And it could be because, it is probably because of those feelings of guilt and embarrassment. And, you're scared you're going to get in trouble. 14% of kids have met online predators in person, and nearly 75% of them have done so more than once, which is a terrifying reality. Then the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children received 29.3 million reports of suspected child exploitation in 2021, which is an increase from 2020. And 63% of child sex abuse materials analyzed depicted children under 8 years old, which is incredibly heartbreaking, but it does happen, which is why we have these conversations. Do you want to take this one?
Yeah. And also, I understand that we are at the noon mark. Since we started a bit late, we're going to keep going. You're welcome to stay. If you have to pop off, go for it. This will be on YouTube, UCASA's YouTube page a little bit later, hopefully today, but it might be tomorrow. So just letting to make sure that we keep folks' time in mind. But so we're seeing this this graph here and showing the different online sexual offenses against children, right? So think about like unwanted sexual questions is asking kids if they're virgins. That would be an example, right? Unwanted sexual talk. It could be an adult talking about masturbation. It could be an adult talking about how they like to kiss people, or they want to kiss this child. Unwanted sexual act request, so sending pictures, maybe calling the child and asking them to masturbate so they can hear the sounds. There's obviously so many different examples. Forced image, so sending an image, forcing someone to take an image, things like that, right? Voluntary older partner, so younger folks, dating, having online relationships, or other relationships with folks who are much older than them, right? But they want to date an older person because they feel like they're mature for their age, or that older person told them that they were mature for their age, that they just get along really well, all those grooming and kind of manipulation behaviors, right? Oh, I like having an older partner, he's my sugar daddy, stuff like that. Non-consensual image sharing, right? So the sharing of explicit images without the consent of the person in that picture. Threatened sharing, so hey, I'm threatening to share these pictures or these conversations with someone to manipulate them, to get them, to coerce them to do something. Non-consensual image taking, this could be during like a video call, maybe if those people meet up, taking pictures, stuff like that. Yeah, so I hope that makes sense. There's so many different examples that it could literally be so many things too.
Yeah, so there are actually 4 different types of predators. So the first one we have is the gatherer. And this is the person that collects media of children that are sexually explicit materials. You've got the producer, which is the one that is distributing this child pornography. You've got the talker, which is the one that you'll find in the chat rooms, you'll find in the Instagram DMs, TikTok DMs. Then you've got the voyager, which is the person that aims to meet their victim in person. And hopefully this makes sense, but they don't have an online predator, ACM, does not need to fall into just one of these categories, right? So one ACM can be the producer and the voyager. They could be all four of these things. They could just be one. It doesn't matter. It's unique to the person who is targeting these children. But yeah, hopefully that makes sense. We can skip this if you want. We don't need to play it. So here's some examples of what grooming looks like. So this is how an ACM is going to build a child's trust. Okay. So they're trying to manipulate them into believing, well, to believe that they cannot escape safely. Okay. So there are a few tactics. I touched on these earlier. So, you're giving compliments. Oh my gosh, you're beautiful. You're so pretty. Telling the child they look old. There's no way you're 13. You've got to be at least 18. You've got to be at least 17. Giving an opportunity. So like they're watching the child's content or taking note about what that child is interested in. I think you could be a wonderful actress. I have some opportunities for you. Playing the white knight. So what that means is they're going to pretend like they're this protector. There's some really scary things on here. I can protect you. I want to protect you from these things. And then, of course, pressuring response, which I mentioned earlier. If you don't respond to me, I'm going to kill myself. If you end this, I'm going to kill myself, which, for anybody, that's quite terrifying, but especially for a child, that can be a very scary interaction, especially when you don't feel like you have an adult to talk to, because we know that a lot of these kids are not telling adults. So obviously, technology is going to continue to advance. It's going to become, better, for lack of a better word. And, like we touched on earlier, these are old behaviors, but now we are having new tools to do these things to other people. So let's talk about some barriers. So when I talk to students about this, the number one thing they are afraid of is that, they're going to get in trouble or they're going to get grounded. This is going to happen. They're going to be embarrassed, but there are also other barriers. Okay. So you've got services that are not designed with youth in mind, fear of retribution from abusive partners or others. So this could be, like an abuser, whether it be an adult or in the context of like a teen relationship, right? This could be like, if I tell somebody, they're going to share my pictures. If I tell somebody, they might hurt themselves. A lack of resources, lack of freedom of movement. Not every teenager is going to have access to certain resources or know how to get to those things. You've got pressure from friends and family and community. We live in a really religious state. There's a lot of pressure that comes with that, especially if you grew up, in any type of religion, but specifically here, there's a lot of pressure that comes with expectations of religion and, just family dynamics and friends, depending on, where you come from, what your family's like, lack of empowerment and autonomy. So, just not having these conversations and maybe like a low, them having some low self-esteem and not feeling like they can do anything about this, not feeling empowered in their own body and their autonomy. And then, of course, a distrust of authority. Not all students are going to trust any form of authority, whether it is law enforcement or a parent or a teacher, any type of somebody that could help them. There is a distrust of that there for, societal reasons, cultural reasons, whatever it may be. So let's talk about how you can help, whether you work with teenagers or you have a teenagers. So adultism is the prejudice or discrimination against young people as a group. So you've got this fun little Matilda example. You got, I'm smart, you're dumb. I'm big, you're little. I'm right, you're wrong. And there's nothing you can do about it. They've also, like we've talked about, they have a fear of being judged by adults and being misunderstood. You don't understand where I'm coming from, how this happened. They're embarrassed to talk about it. Maybe they're scared of, not being believed, being blamed, being victim blamed, having their experience minimized, like, it's not that deep, it's not that big of a deal, you'll be fine, or getting in trouble in general. So let's see. Do you want to add anything to that, Andy?
No, I think you got it.
Okay, perfect.
Pretty good. Yeah.
Sweet. So let's talk tips for working with teenagers. Okay. So the first step is to listen. Really try to actively listen. Don't jump in. Let them explain their story and what happened. And of course, believe them. They are looking for somebody to be on their side at this point. They want to know that you're there to support them, but you also need to explain your confidentiality limits, right? We're all mandatory reporters. We have to tell somebody if something has crossed a line. Don't use victim blaming language. Things like, oh, come on, I've raised you better than this. How could you be so stupid? You should know better, all those sorts of things. Ask what may prevent them from seeking services. There's a long list that we just went over, and every child's unique and will have different fears. And so you need to talk through that with them. Expect a lack of trust. Their trust has already been broken by whoever they've been talking to, whether it be an adult or somebody their age. They're going to be hesitant to trust you, most likely. But at the end of the day, what you can do is empower them to make decisions about their own body and what they want to do moving forward. And just be a good support system for them, because if they have at least one stable person in their life, even if their home life isn't, the healthiest, you can be that one stable person for them that can help them move through this, whatever your position is, and can provide them different resources based on your position, which I think is great. So here you've got to ask the right questions when you're having these conversations. How do you know this person? Do you go to school with them? Are you related to this person? Did you meet them on the internet? And who has access to your devices? Ask those right questions. Don't ask how do I word that? Like using that victim blaming language is, I guess, what I'm trying to say. Like, how could you be so stupid? How did you even start this conversation with this person? Just point blank, ask the right questions. How to get all the facts in is what I'm trying to say. Collect all the facts and then decide how you can proceed forward. But I think something that is super, super, super important, and I've seen success with the students that I've worked with, is encouraging a culture of consent among them. Okay. So something as simple as asking for consent to post a picture of your friends and family members. Like if you take a picture with them, ask permission before you post those pictures. Not everybody wants an online presence. Nobody wants, not everybody wants a digital footprint. I think most of us do, but some of us like to be more private. So ask those questions. Encourage them not to take videos and pictures of strangers, even if you think they're weird or you think they're funny or you're mad at them. You don't need to be doing that. You wouldn't want somebody to post a random picture of you or take a picture or video of you without you knowing and then post it online for, people to see. The next is don't encourage cyberbullying. So what I mean by this is kind of what I said a while back. Gen Z is really funny. They come up with a lot of silly things and memes and edits, and that's great. But we walk a fine line sometimes of what's funny and what's not funny, what's hurtful, what's offensive, and all that kind of stuff. So encourage them to speak up when it's not right. And then educate and advocate for online safety. If we can do our part and we could talk about how to be safe online, because this is not going away. So it's, we have to have these conversations with them while they're young, because they're creating an online presence while they're young. So talk to them about how they can be safe, resources, all that kind of, don't talk to people that randomly message you. That sugar daddy in your DMs is not actually a sugar daddy. He's a scammer and he wants to, exploit you or whatever it may be. So some solution, I work in prevention. So, I have a prevention mindset. We can prevent a lot of this through education and awareness, like I just said, support services and legal action if necessary, if it comes to child sex abuse material or, just sexting between teens. And then of course, therapy and teen support groups and ongoing advocacy, following through and making sure that we are still checking in and caring for this individual as they're, healing and moving past what has happened. But most importantly, I think it's super, super, super important that we are holding teenagers accountable for their abusive actions and behaviors. Like I said earlier, a lot of the times when we're younger, we watch the adults in our life and how they behave in their relationships. And sometimes we've got really great examples, and sometimes we don't have great examples. And, sometimes we take those things on and we become some form of an unhealthy or toxic partner. But that's our normal. That is what's normal to us. We think this is what love is. We think that it's supposed to be jealous and it's supposed to be really intense and all of these sorts of things. But holding teens accountable for that and saying, hey, that's not cool, and letting them know, you can unlearn those things. It takes work, but it is so worth it, because everybody deserves to feel safe and everybody deserves to have a healthy relationship with whoever they want to be in a relationship, right? So holding them accountable is huge. All right, so here are some resources. We're just about to wrap this up, but these are some really amazing resources for teenagers. If you work in prevention with teenagers, I'm sure you've heard of most of these. But a lot of them give resources and education on online safety, and healthy relationships in general. What's the difference between healthy, unhealthy, and abusive? And yeah, that's great. So